My name's Givens. I am the founding CEO of Amy. It's a software sales recruitment company. We specialize pretty much in diversifying tech companies with qualified persons of color. Um, so sales is really the lifeblood of businesses. It's truly an art form, and a mentor of mine calls it an exact science. So prior to having any growth taking place at your startup, you'll need to create a sales process and a funnel that pulls qualified leads in. So this panel will actually unpack everything there is to know about creating a sales funnel, how to develop process and practice, and our discussion today will touch on a few things. First, do you need a process before you start selling? Second, understanding the notion of prospecting in order to build a sales funnel. And third, is the CRM needed right away? And finally, understanding where warm leads and outbound outreach fits in. And joining us today, we have Rachel Bates and Kishore, who is going to join us in answering some questions we have. So let's dive in. We know a sales process is a systematic, multi-step approach that enables a sales force to close deals and increase margins. And so my first question to the panel today is, what is the best way to think about building a sales process when you are a team of one?
Yeah. Can you guys hear me? Yeah. No, I can take that question. To be honest. No, it's funny. I remember we didn't have any sales process when it was a team of one, right? It is just selling through your network and advisors and figuring out what's working and what's not working. Uh, I think the couple of things I would highlight is
Yeah, do you guys want me to take while we wait for him to come in, I'll try and take the answer. When you have a sales team of one, are you talking about one founder? You're the only founder, or you actually have a salesperson? I'm going to assume you're talking about the founder-led sales. That's a very different process, and it's a very, very different game than when you have a whole sales team. And one of the biggest things is to realize what stage you're at. The way in which you're selling from a person of one is going to be really you're probably just trying to figure out product market fit and make sure that there's a market for your product versus trying to scale your business. So you're going to think about your sales very differently at that stage.
Awesome. Yeah. Anyone else want to chime into that? Kishore, I know you started off.
Yeah, I think they're probably figuring out the in-person setup. I don't know if the team in person can hear me, but I think they're still figuring that out. So uh, I'll let Brian answer those questions, and once that is,
Can you can you hear guys hear me?
I can hear you, Rachel. Yeah,
What about in Boston?
yeah, I think that's what.
That's the problem. But they seem to hear you, Gibbons.
Correct.
Okay.
Are we
Just here on the Startup Boston team, we are experiencing a little bit of difficulty with them hearing us in the in-person room. So we're troubleshooting it right now. If you guys want to continue ahead with your conversation, they're gonna get it all looped in on the in-person side, but you can continue.
okay?
Thanks for your
Great,
patience.
great. Of course. Let's move on here. So we know that there's tons of unique tools out there and tons of systems out there to help us get ahead in developing business. What are some resourceful tools needed to manage your sales process? I'd say as a team of one right now.
Yeah, happy to take that. So I'll start with answering the process question. I totally agree with the comment on the Boston side that getting product market fit is the most important thing, and that requires a lot of experimentation and a lot of listening. But having worked in 5 different sales companies, there's certain things which are true for any sales process, which is typically you're going to have a prospecting and how do you get the initial calls. The second stage is having a discovery and understanding what the customer's saying. The third part could be one more call, or it could be 10 more calls, depending on the complexity of the product. But that's when you're typically getting scope, understanding technical requirements, figuring out timelines, figuring out key stakeholders, and that's the sort of buying process. Then there's the contract and legal stage, and then there's the onboarding stage. And that's true no matter what company you're at. And so marking out and being conscious of what are the activities that I'm doing at these stages that are getting things to move along is perhaps the most important. Like just keeping track of what are you doing at each stage, you'll actually start to develop the sales process. So you need somebody in that role who's able to understand that concepts of the team. They've probably got some type of sales methodology, whether it's Sandler, whether it's Challenger, whether it's Medic, but that's actually more important than understanding the stages of the deal. And then starting to having the right conversations. From a tools perspective of a team of one, I think there's 2 or 3 things which are essential. One is, how do I identify potential buyers? And so you want to identify the companies and sizes and who that companies that you can go after, and then contacts within those companies that you can do. So whether it, and then how to automate some of that outreach to them. So whether it's Zoom Info or LinkedIn for identifying companies and prospects, some outreach or some type of sales tool that you can send emails and make calls through, and then you can track it all. Those are the essential calls that I would do. And your job as a team of one is to act like you're a company of 100. And so anything that you can do to make yourself look bigger and better for it is what I'd recommend.
No, I sort of completely agree with what Rachel said. I think the only point I'll add is it's very important to also bring the product team into the loop in these different discussions, because in the early stages of the company, like your product is not built out yet, and it's very important for the product team to be looped in across these stages so that they exactly know where the blockage is and can sort of build products accordingly to unblock them. But sort of completely aligned with what Rachel is saying.
Yeah. No, that makes total sense. Thank you for sharing those insights with us, guys. So what would you say is the best approach to building a sales pipeline as a new startup?
Yeah, I can sort of quickly talk about it, and I'm sure Rachel will have interesting thoughts. I think it's important to build, I would say, the prospect list that Rachel mentioned across different company sizes, right? For example, early on, we didn't know which segment of the market will work well for us. So we did a lot of experimentation and A/B testing to see how is the messaging working, which segment of the market is it working, to really figure out, okay, these are the 200 companies we like aggressively go against. But coming to that conclusion actually took a while to test out constant messaging and the segment of the market, and also the titles as well. A lot of times we think that CMO is who you're going to buy the product, but they're so busy that eventually you will have to sell to a junior person and sort of bring the person eventually. So I would say constantly experiment against the company stage, the title, and the messaging, right? And once you get a lot more pull from the market, that's when you will understand that, hey, this is probably what's working at the right time.
Yeah, tips for cold outreaches and building sales pipeline. Yeah, identifying the accounts that you want to go after. But then I think you got to be constantly learning. So leveraging any customer calls that you have about that's what resonated, that's the pain point, and creating messaging around like how do you take what you're hearing on the calls and then make that into your messaging, and then that's the best way in terms of building cold outreaches that will resonate. It takes time, it takes iteration, it takes a lot of listening, and then experimentation about who is the right person to talk about in the company, and having value in every interaction, because that only helps you in building more effective messaging.
Yeah. Rachel, I really like that last point you made around, understanding who is the right person to talk to at a company. You can have the right message, but be talking to the wrong person is like working backwards still. So I definitely like that point a lot. So you can have all of the right tools, you can have all the right systems, and maybe even the right process in place to generate sales. But without the right sales talent, you probably won't see much success. So, what traits should one be looking for in someone when hiring their first ever teammate in terms of sales?
Yeah, happy to do this. First sales rep is going to be incredibly different from the third or the fourth or the fifth. They are typically very entrepreneurial. They're very motivated and engaged by the process of figuring it out. They enjoy that intellectual challenge. They love the business challenge, and they're highly, highly motivated and resourceful. They can incorporate a huge amount of information. They typically they're highly, highly engaged in what you're doing. So I found there's a team of people who really enjoy this and get involved that early. There also could be, if they truly understand the value out of what your product's doing, that can also be helpful in terms of having a network or the market or being passionate about what it is that you're offering. I think that's huge. For example, getting someone to come in, learn your company, learn how to figure it out, and learn a whole new segment and product is too much. So you got to have some of those attributes. And yeah, they might not be the person who's around for 2 years. They're probably going to be in some other type of growth role. They are very comfortable with ambiguity. They are very comfortable, like sort of, presenting themselves as the company of 100 when you might only be 10, and that presence and some solid training and sales process, and somebody that you enjoy working with because you're going to be collaborating with them super closely.
No, I sort of completely agree with what Rachel said. I think the word entrepreneurial is so important because I feel like if you hire a rep from Salesforce and put them into an early stage company, they will fail because you are getting solid pipeline every day to prospect and close deals. Whereas in early stage, you have to go out and create your own pipeline, right? And the second thing I'll say is that it's very important to compensate the reps in early stage companies the right way, right? Because you are getting into a company which doesn't have a lot of brand awareness, right? So, for example, we used to compensate our first AE on opportunities that they're able to. Yeah, can you hear me? I can hear you guys.
Yeah, we can hear you and you can hear me, and that's fantastic news because we mitigated that technical difficulty.
That's awesome.
Okay. So we're gonna try this from the top one more time, if that's okay with y'all. Yeah.
Yeah, we had some practice.
Topic, and I love that. Okay, very, very good. Okay. So thank you for all for coming out to the third day of the 6th annual Boston Startup Week. We're excited to have you here. And this is a hybrid event. As you can see, we can take place on this awesome Goldcast platform. You can participate both virtually in the Q&A and the chat function and here in the room on there. And I'll be running around the microphone as well. So without further ado, finally, I'm going to hand this microphone over to Givens. Givens, we've got Brian in the room, and we're going to tackle this session as we go.
Glad to make it. Can they hear
Awesome.
me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Okay, good. We
can absolutely hear you. Hey, everybody. My name is Givens. I am the founding CEO of Amy, a software sales recruitment company. We specialize in diversifying tech with qualified persons of color. And so I'm very excited to be here and having this conversation with you all. So sales is the lifeblood of a business. It's truly an art form. I have a mentor of mine who calls it an inexact science. So prior to any growth taking place at your startup, you'll need to create a sales process and funnel that pulls qualified leads in. This panel will unpack everything there is to know about creating a sales funnel and how to develop process and practice. Our discussion today will touch on a few things. First, do you need a process before you start selling? Second, understanding the notion of prospecting in order to build that sales funnel. And third, is a CRM needed right away? And finally, understanding where warm leads and outbound outreach fits. So without further ado, let's dive in. And I'm joined today with Kishore, Rachel, and Brian. So we know a sales process is a systematic multi-step approach that enables a sales force to close more deals. What's the best way to think about building a sales process when you are a team of one?
I'm going to go ahead and jump on that. We were talking about that earlier here. When you're a team of one, I think you still need a process. It just has to be a very flexible process and I call it agile, but a very agile process that can change very quickly because you're going to be testing more than you're going to be selling while you figure things out, and you're going to be learning in order to get to a repeatable process. But in the beginning, you're not going to have anything that's repeatable. You're going to do a lot of things that don't repeat.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. The only point I'll add is that I didn't have a process. I was just like constantly using my network, figuring out what's working and what's not working. It was a constant hustle. The only thing I'll say is that the founder has to be involved in the sales process for the first 10 customers. If it that doesn't happen, the company is destined to fail. Right. So that's like only caveat I'll add. Like there has to be a process with the founder actively involved in those discussions.
100% agree with that.
Yeah, and I'll add it 5 different companies. There's something consistent about how sales happen, and that would be there's the prospect of getting the first call or first meeting. So how you prospect and get a call scheduled, the discovery process where you understand a little bit more about the problem that you're trying to solve. Then there's the scoping deal process, which depending on the size of company you're working with or the complexity of the sale, could be 1 call, could be 5 calls. But that type of scoping, when are you going to start? What's the problem? Specifications, that's a stage. And then there's the contracting, legal, security type stage of like the final buying stage. And then there's the onboarding. So no matter where you're at, that's typical stages in your sales process. So while you can't say you need to do X and you have to follow it, you should be really aware of what are the activities that you're doing in each of those stages and what stage you're at in the deal, and having that commonality of language and adopting stages or language from a methodology such as Sandler or Challenger sale or something like that to the equivalent. So because those are pretty consistent. So I totally agree. It's very iterative. You have to constantly be listening to customers and coming back and then defining that sales process as you go along. But those stages are consistent.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more myself. So there's tons of unique tools and systems out there to help us get ahead in developing business. What are some resourceful tools needed to manage your sales process, especially as a team of 1?
I'll go ahead and take that. Well, I know there's a question you want to talk about later that you mentioned is CRM. I think the earlier you can start with a CRM to start capturing data and the history of your communication with everybody you meet with is super important. I can't tell you how many companies I go into that are still on spreadsheets. And the first thing I would say is you get over to a CRM because it's really painful not to later if you don't. There's and as you get further along, you're going to want to use, whether that CRM is HubSpot or not, doesn't matter, or Salesforce, but you're going to want to start to use specialized tools, information tools like Zoom Info, etc. Email tools to help you learn how to email better, like Lavender. There's a whole range of things you just that you're going to need at some point. As a team of 1, you want to find the cheapest ones and the easiest to use.
Yeah.
Rachel, go for it. I think you had a thoughtful answer earlier.
Yeah, happy to do it. So I think the first thing you need to do is figure out what if it's B2B, who are your customers, and have a tool to identify the companies that you want to sell into. Second of all, you need a tool which helps identify the contacts at those companies and contact information to how to reach out to them. Third of all, you need some way to figure out how to email them and make phone calls, whether that's outreach or sales left. And then the CRM is where all of that information should flow together. Do not think about automation. Think about your goal to be, as a team of 1, you've got to have the appearance of being a team of 100. So to keep that perception and brand on the other side. So Zoom Info, LinkedIn are really good company identifiers, as well as people contact information. Outreach, I'd recommend for emails and calling. Salesforce or HubSpot. It's really about how can I get started quickest for the team for the team of 1.
Yeah. The only thing I'll add is that I think LinkedIn is an extremely powerful tool, right? Like you should ideally go through all the common connections of your investors, advisors, who's actually in the network that you can get warm introductions to. Because I was not aware of tools like Outreach, Zoom Info at that point of time, and I completely used LinkedIn Navigator to look at those common connections and send personalized emails. So because all you need is those first 10 conversations to be very productive, and you can scale it up after that. But LinkedIn's effect can't be underestimated. It's a very powerful tool.
Very powerful, LinkedIn. Very powerful.
Yeah, in many ways.
What's the best approach to building a sales pipeline as a new startup or an unknown brand?
Yeah, that's a tough one. It's like so I'll tell you what worked for us initially. It was definitely shameless asks from like friends and family to make introductions, right? Like I just like shameless doing a bunch of calls, emails to people that I know of, asking for introductions. Second is, I think after a point of time, I used to personally send 70 to 80 personalized emails through an outbound perspective. And people say outbound doesn't work. It worked for us, at least to get responses in terms of the messaging, the who's the title you should go after, right? What company stage. So I think it makes sense once you have those first 10, 15 introductory calls, it makes sense to immediately switch on your outbound to immediately increase the pipeline. And you can always work with folks who can help you with like market research, like getting the right contacts, etc., so that you don't have to do it. But I think outbound works, at least for the first 100 conversations, at least for me. I'd let Rachel and folks pitch in.
I 100% agree with that. Outbound works. And I see a lot of companies trying to build inbound engines too early. I know that they work, but the outbound, one of the best advantages for an early company is it's going to help you figure out your messaging and what works and what doesn't. You should be A/B testing everything, the subject line, the first paragraph, the words, everything. And you should have a really, really acute attention to what messaging is and isn't resonating with your audience.
Oh. I don't know what happened with my. Oh, there we go. From a pipeline perspective and cold outreaches, I totally agree on Brian's point about the messaging. I think what you're probably going to have very few customer calls, but make sure that you're recording them, make sure you're listening to them, and whatever pain they're describing or what prompted them to take the call that is aligned with your product, take that messaging and put it into your outreach. And then you're looking for people with common pain points and common challenges, and it has to be about what the customer is looking to solve versus what you're doing. And that's super effective in terms of building that cold outreach, outbound pipeline.
I just want to add one thing to what Rachel just said, because I couldn't agree more. To record those calls and bring them to somebody who's been there before and done it and understands it and can give you feedback. You will learn more from listening to those with an advisor or somebody who's good at this than you will doing anything else. And the good thing for them is they can watch it. They can listen to it at double speed. I love listening to calls at double speed because it's half the time I spend otherwise.
Yeah, tools. So just to building on the tools thing, Chorus or Gong or Outreach or something like that, the recording of the calls. I've managed reps for years, but this has been a new thing for me over the last couple of years of having these call recordings. And the perception of what people tell you happened on the call, and then when you actually go in and listen to it yourself is two very different things. And then you can put 100% focus on what the customer is saying, the language they use, little snippets, make it resonate with them, take that and then put that language direct into your messaging to get more calls like it.
If you're a team of one, use Fathom. All the tools that Rachel just mentioned are great. And if you're a team of one, you don't have any money, use Fathom. It's free.
Yeah. And Gong is especially great to not only learning a little bit more about the conversations with your customers, but also just developing yourself as a sales rep as well, right? Finding different ways to improve, asking these extra questions that could really drive out the pain and validate, your capabilities at solving their problems. So definitely great points as well. Well, I mean, you can have all of the right tools, all the right systems and processes in place to generate sales, but without the right sales talent, you probably won't see much success. What traits should you look for in someone when you're looking to make that first hire?
I'm happy to go ahead and jump on that. Grit, creativity, that first hire, and accept that first hire may not be there in that role for many, many years, that may be a year or two. But have they ever done anything before where they had to figure things out without a playbook? I'm afraid whenever I see somebody who's always, always been at the same big company for too long, or you see somebody who worked at Oracle and they worked for a startup and then went back and worked at SAP or something. I really worry because they're happy. I say that's their happy place. Big companies are their happy place. So I want to figure out in their resume where their happy place is, and are they comfortable with being uncomfortable? Are they comfortable with, are they curious? Are they willing to ask tons of questions? Are they kind of person who always keeps asking more questions? Or are they satisfied with just, knowing the superficial level? Because if they're not really digging down into the why, beyond a good salesperson, what a normal good salesperson does that anyways, but beyond that, they're just not going to survive as the first salesperson.
Rachel, go for it. I think you also had an interesting perspective on how that person should be entrepreneurial, right? Like, I think it's a very fair statement.
That's the word I would use, that the entrepreneurial, they're happening starting from zero, and they really enjoy the process of figuring it out. Like, that's far more exciting for them and intellectually engaging. So I totally agree on the curiosity statement and asking the questions and the why. Very comfortable with ambiguity. Don't know, let's figure it out. Also has the presence to show that has the executive presence that you might be acting like a company of 100 when you might really be 5. You need to have someone who has that sales skills and is motivated. Maybe somebody, like, if you have a product, somebody who's got the sales skills, but perhaps somebody understands, really bought into the mission about why you started this company, comes from the space, understands the business value that you're providing, and can really articulate it. I think having someone join a new company, join a new industry, and be the person figuring it out, those 3 things you can't do. Like, you're just setting them up for failing. So entrepreneurial is really important, but they have to have some type of industry knowledge, be invested. You also have to like them. It's really important. They're trying to get customers to do things that you wouldn't want to do. Why wouldn't? It's the same thing. And you're going to spend a lot of time with them. So you've got to enjoy working with them, collaborate, getting.
I heard someone say once, am I willing to spend a day in a canoe with them?
That's a very fair estimate.
I think everything I agree with Rachel. The one I would maybe push back on, although you said that a couple of the 3, the industry experience I've seen usually works, but not. It's sometimes industry experience can be a hindrance because they care more about the relationships than they do about your company. But that's a longer conversation.
Yeah. And I'm going to drill down here on something that was said around, being comfortable with discomfort. It's a big lesson I had to learn doing sales myself. And so let's provide a picture of what that might look like, an example of what that might look like when we say being comfortable with discomfort. What does that look like?
Well, I think. Yeah. No, I think the only thing that comes to my mind immediately, Brian, is that I think it's easy for sales reps from companies like Gong and Salesforce, etc., to close deals because they always have pipeline, right? But when you go to an early stage company, like, you don't have pipeline to start with, right? So you have to sort of start sourcing your own pipeline and be comfortable with that in the first place. That is number 1. Number 2 is that a lot of good sales reps want to make a lot of money, right? Like, that's like so obvious. And when they come to an early stage company where there is not a lot of pipeline, etc., right? It's tough for them to think about how compensation works for them, right? So there is also discomfort in that, right? So and the third point is a lot of sales reps from bigger companies start blaming the product and the company if they truly don't believe in what the company does, because early stage is all about figuring things out and being like what Rachel said, like being comfortable with the process of ambiguity. So there are multiple things that a sales rep has to deal with on a day-to-day basis when they're trying to join an early stage company. So those are the few things that I remember some of the sales reps that we hired early on that didn't work out had those problems because they came from slightly bigger companies who had an established brand, had a bigger pipeline. But they switched to an early stage company which doesn't have that, and they're not willing to go out of their comfort zone to sort of build their own pipeline and sort of go out and close deals. That's like the point that I quickly want to make, but I'll let Rachel and Brian pitch in as well.
Yeah, happy to. I think, and I joined this last company when I was 12 people, and that was the smallest stage company I've ever joined, but I joined in, and even thinking smaller stages beyond that, it's the same logic applies. That sometimes I find myself and I'm like, oh, who does that? And then if you're looking around and asking who's doing it, then the answer is this person. So like last year, that's what uncomfortable me, and you might not have ever done before. And guess what? You just have to figure it out. And that could be implementation before you have an implementation engineer. It could be telling a customer this product there, and then going back to your engineering team and say, can we build this and change the roadmap? And so that means that you have to have a confidence, and you also have to have faith in the long term that I can see where this is heading. If we make these calls, we can make the actions, and I bring in the right people, and we can figure it out, then take some risks and some chances. So I think that's the case, and being comfortable with, like, I haven't done this before, let's figure it out, let's get it done. I think that's what it means. But that entrepreneurial spirit is really important.
To go back to your earlier question, because it's related, is what do you look for? Are you willing? Is the person willing to suck at something for a period of time? Like they're just gonna, I'm sorry to say it, but they're just gonna be really bad at it. They're just gonna suck. And where in their life have you done something that you suck at for a while? And so I look for things like, did they play a sport? Did they play an instrument? Were they actors? Did they do something where they always had to get to a new level and they sucked, and they were comfortable with, it's going to take me a while to figure this out, but I enjoy figuring this out more than I mind it sucking.
Yep.
Right. Well, Brian gave us some traits that we should look for when hiring our first sales rep. And I imagine you want all of your sales reps to have grit, to be curious, to be hardworking. But what differentiates that first hire and that 10th hire?
Rachel, do you want to take that? You think you've handled more more bigger teams, so maybe you want to take that?
For sure. I mean, I think the first ones, we've talked a lot about it. They're going to be the leaders that are comfortable with liking the figuring out. That by the 10th person, you're going to want to see a track record of coming in, quota attainment, understanding the process, what it's like to be at a team, what their rank is on the team in terms of performance. Like if they were part of a team of 6 or part of a team of 10, where did they rank in terms of performance on that team? Like you want someone who can stand out on that sense. I always look for people who have had progression within a company. So typically sales reps, you're going to see promotions after 18 months. So that could be they started as an SDR, within a year or 18 months, then they're promoted to sales rep. Then the sales rep, then they might be promoted to senior or go up a tier in terms of the vertical that they're presenting. I can tell you what not to look for. Reps who've been around 11 months and have a track history of staying at companies 11 months typically mean to me that they're neither the A player nor the D player, and that they're sort of the mediocre who can just get by. And so that's something not to look for, which I think when you have to 10th hire and you've got to have the volume of candidates to get in, it's really easy to hire people at that level who perhaps don't have that competitiveness and grit, the standout that you really need to succeed.
I think one of the bigger differences that I see often when I'm working with teams is when I'm hiring that first person, I'm looking for all those curiosity, the willingness to break rules, and all those traits that make somebody great at that stage. That become untrue at the 11th person, because I need somebody who's going to follow a process. And they're gonna update, and their ability to update Salesforce or whatever you're using is almost as important as their ability to ask questions. Whereas at the early stage, already you don't update it, like you're so good at what you're doing, I'll put up with that shit. Pardon my language. It changes. It changes the way I think about it. But the 11th person on, you do not follow a process.
Totally, 100% agree.
Yeah, and what kind of questions should we be asking, to identify and draw out those traits that we're looking for in our reps, especially during the interview process?
The couple of questions I usually ask people, and it's always an iteration. I'm also still figuring out what's the right way to interview sales reps. It's an evolution of sorts. But one thing is what Brian said. I love people who have actually failed at something and figured out something along the way. because because the sales reps are bound to fail at something, be it a deal, be it a contract. So I love figuring out if people have fundamentally failed in their life and showed resilience to actually climb through that journey. Right? That is one. A second is, one of the things that I'm learning is how important teamwork is between sales reps, right? Because you go into a lot of companies, the culture is so bad because every sales rep is trying to steal another person's deal. Like there is no clear sort of camaraderie in terms of how do you go after things. So I love people who have worked in sort of smaller teams before, especially be it a team sport or things like that they have been part of. So I sort of check for teamwork and like being failed at something and gone through that through sheer resilience. Those things I try to identify through my interview through a series of questions, but those are the two things I look for.
Great points.
Yeah.
I think
I'd add.
so. Go ahead, Brian.
Sorry. I would add. I always like to see. Tell me about a time that you had a major setback, and it can be personal or professional. And tell me how you rose up from it, or you turned it into a good experience. I've had people tell me some BS answers like, "Oh, I was going to miss my quarter and I didn't," and that was really, I really like, really, you can't do better than that. And I've had people that have had me literally in tears telling me stories that were just so emotional that I just saw the person as for who they were and what their grit was. So I always find that something like that shows me who they really are.
Yeah, and not to make things more complicated, but I don't think you can evaluate or hire someone based on one or two interview questions. I think it's about an entire hiring process and having a super structured hiring process along the way, of which certain questions are really important. So screening, hiring manager interview, we have a group interview, we have them present on a sales tool, then an executive interview, and then references. All of that is really important, including an evaluation of their resume. If you're looking for curiosity, does their resume jump out at you? Have they done something interesting in life? Study abroad? Something on the resume, like they did this random thing, like something that shows that they're paying attention to to the world and what's going on, and they're generally curious about life. What they're reading, those things spring out to you about curiosity. Curious people should be incredibly engaged with the conversation. You should learn every time you talk to them, but it's never about one or two questions. It's about having a very structured hiring process throughout that you can evaluate people consistently and hopefully make good decisions.
Yeah, and that personal story as well could be leveraged by interviewing manager as to, hey, why do you want to work here, right? So the more that person's story resonates and ties in with why they want to work at the company, the better chance you have at hiring someone who's going to stick around and perform and eager to learn.
Totally. And if they're meeting with different people, what have they learned from each of those interactions about the company and why they want to work with you? They should be telling you that.
Yep.
For sure.
I agree 100% with Rachel's comment about having a process. And I'd say even if you're just hiring your first hire, try documenting it. And even if it looks terrible, just document it so that you can figure out where along the way you might be able to improve it, and just keep chipping away at it. Don't mind sucking at it. Just keep chipping away at it.
Yeah. Guys, when I was thinking about building out Amy and developing Amy, one value driver for us was understanding that companies that are diverse, they really tend to outperform competition by a sizable chunk. Just ask McKinsey. So what importance does having a diverse sales team have in driving results?
I'm happy to take that. What I've seen is the old day, I'm old enough to remember, sales teams that were like locker rooms. And so when you see sales teams that are diverse, the ideas that come out of it, the sharing of experiences, and then your customers are diverse. Yeah. So if your team isn't diverse, how can you sell to a diverse world? If you don't have women, people of color on your team, whatever you're looking for in your client base, how can you possibly have that if you don't have that on your team? I'm not saying that you have to have a woman selling to a woman, but if you can't have that on your team and sharing ideas, how are you going to learn from the market the way you're going to need to?
Agreed.
Yeah,
100%. Yeah.
No, go ahead, Shirley. I think you have more experience managing diverse teams. I'll let you go first, and I'll add a small point later.
100%. It's really important thinking about that team dynamic too. Like, it's the ideas that are shared, but also, you know, what having a good mix of people on your team is going to bring to the company and bring to the culture is just really, really important in terms of how the team behaves and cooperates. Like, we have a customer base. We sell to senior leaders of HR from corporate companies, and I can tell you the difference of bringing in women who are older than myself onto those calls, because they can interact with women who are as old as myself or above, compared to having someone much younger telling someone how to use software in that older company has made, their ability to get rapport, ability to get relationships with those people, be able to have a meaningful relationship about the business conversation is just hugely beneficial. Similar to people of color we've had on calls and interaction with customers on that side, etc. So it's really, really important. Our customers are caring about it. We care about it. It brings a huge amount of culture and value to the team, but also the relationships that you can get on the customer side are no doubt going to help business performance.
Yeah. No, thanks for sharing that. There's nothing like understanding your ideal customer, but more importantly, also knowing where to go to find them. It really just makes case studies and converting a lot easier. You have a story that you can share with your ideal customer. What tips do you have on, narrowing down customer segments in need of your services?
So if you're talking about an early stage, narrowing down customer segments is what I like to call it, finding a beachhead market. To use the military term of finding a beachhead that you can land on and expand from there. And the only way I can say to do that is find who has the most acute pain, the pain that they're willing to. Everybody thinks part with money. Money is rarely the real obstacle. Yeah. It's let's figure out who's willing to put their reputation and time on the line to work with this small little dinky startup that nobody's heard of. Because if this fails, are they going to get fired? Are they going to look like, oh yeah, you're the guy that brought in that stupid little company? Can you go get a real company next time? So remember that they're selling against they're risking their reputation. That's the most important thing their risk they're taking. So they have to be their pain has to be so great that there's no other solution out there that can solve it that is small.
Yeah, no, we made a mistake in the first year. We actually prioritized customers who paid the most, but when you look at the retention metrics, it's not the case, right? Like, people who actually have the most pain retain as well. So I will probably prioritize focusing on customers who are growing but also retaining after multiple years, and that becomes like your ideal segment, because you ultimately want to make sure that your customers stay with you and not just use you for a year of sorts. So I will probably track those two metrics very closely and focus on that segment very deep down.
Yeah.
How to find them and identify them, and then what are two different questions, or like how you know it when you see it. So examples when you see it. If they move to a new company, the first thing that they want to do is bring you in. It could be that they're as excited about the innovation and product as much as you are, and they're giving you feedback and invested in the product roadmap as much as you are. Phenomenal. Anyone who's willing to do that with you and be on that journey so early, like listen, and they're teaching you more about the market, just phenomenal. If you see any of that type of activity and you can replicate it and you think, oh, there's actually 3 of these and it's not just one company, that is gold. Because there's people, if totally what Brian said, if they've got a pain and that pain is not unique to them and it's something that more companies or more people could be experiencing, but they're the ones who are willing to go out on a limb and take a chance and try and fix it, amazing. And then just think your job is to identify who are those other people with the pain, how do I identify more with them, and then figure out how do we talk about those pain points over and over again and build solutions around them.
I 100% agree with that. I think the the challenge of finding those with the pain. One of the things that I like to do is get companies to find design partners. To go to Rachel's point, is say, sell them on a package that it's a design partner, that we're going to design around what you need. The only challenge there and the danger is make sure you're not designing a product for them, but nobody else.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
Because then you become a custom software house, and that just sucks.
Yeah.
Not in a good way.
Replicable. What they have is also the same as 3 or 4 other people. They just happen to be the ones who are willing to get on the phone with you about it.
It should be stuff that's on your roadmap, or that should be on your roadmap. Exactly.
Yeah.
So last question, everyone, before we open up the floor for some questions. What's your number one tip for prospecting ideal customers? Everyone has their own styles of prospecting. I have my own style, but what tips and advice do you guys have on that?
I'll let you guys go. I've got some ideas, but I'll let you go. All right, I'll hop on. Rachel mentioned something earlier. I'm looking for people who are new to roles. Someone who's been in a role for 4 years is probably going to be more risk averse to take on a new company that's a challenge, that's a risk. Someone who's new in the role is probably willing to make a quick change, wants to show they've got 180 days to show that they can make a quick change. And if they take a risk, it's very little. And if it doesn't work out, there's 10 other things they're trying. They can just sweep it under the table. I'm looking for, if it's an innovation role, I want to make sure they report to somebody senior and that they've done something significant in the past, or because sometimes innovation roles can just be, places to put people. It's pasture to put people who don't have other roles. So be careful of things like that. And don't get caught up in those roles that people are just kicking tires and they want to spend a lot of time with you, but don't actually have a budget. Make sure you ask the hard questions of, do they have budget, and what's the decision process like, and why are they really looking to why would you take a risk with me is an okay question to ask.
Yeah.
That's a great point. And one insight I had early on was that people who are more risk-taking are present across all company stages. You will think that somebody in a public company won't take a risk on you, and it's completely dependent on the nature of that person and how open they are to new startups. So don't discount the fact that these kinds of people will only be in early stage companies. They are likely to be there across all companies. You just have to test out what that person actually says.
Yeah, that's super interesting. I like that. And you do see it for sure. The behaviors look different because it's inherently going to be slower, but you're right that you still have to identify the risk takers. I really like that. I'm going to say that, and this is going to make me sound really old, but there's so much automation and scaling, and how do I use the tools? And everyone wants to spend all day talking about these tools and automations, and you actually need to spend the time. If you put that energy into writing a really, really strong and compelling message, 3 bullets for why the hell that person would want to buy, and pressure test it. If I was that person, why would I want to pay that attention? Do that work, because I think that will make you stand out. I get spammed 1 million times a day with rubbish automated messages. They don't per my pain point. If someone sends me something really specific, understands, hey, I'm talking to Rachel at WorkStep, she's concerned with X, Y, and Z, and it happens to be my pain point, I'll get that call immediately. So don't spend 3 hours talking about how you're automating for a team of 1. Spend that same 3 hours writing an email, or writing 3 good quality emails. I swear to God. And then you write the email, and then you've got the message as soon as you get the person on the phone.
I 1,000,000% agree with that. And on top of that, you'll be able to automate eventually, because if you get 5 people that have the same problem, you'll be able to make it a little more, you'll be able to take a lot of that customization out, but spend that time. It seems like it's tedious, but spend that time.
Writing is really important, and it's not a waste of time. And all these reps that just want to spend all day talking about automations, it's bullshit.
I think that's a great point, Rachel, right? It sounds like what you're also saying is, hey, part of your prospecting needs to be account research, right? Go on that company website, find out what initiatives they're working on, have a talking point, something that's going to relate to them, and get them to want to stay on the phone with you, drive that value. So definitely a great point. So I want to open up the floor for some questions. and let people ask, really good questions that they might have. So we'll take the time. We have 8 minutes left to do so.
Hi, my name is Maria Ko. Thank you for being here. My question is about the skill set of the top salespeople you have worked with thus far. I'm curious if you can think about those people that you really felt were great at sales. What were the top 3 actual skills that they've learned to master that you think people should really focus on in order to be great at sales? Thank you.
I think there's difference between skills and attributes, right? So I think from attributes perspective, I think the grit is really important, and persistence and perseverance, they're never going to give up. I think following a process and being disciplined and that process early on could be, I take notes after every call, I send an email after every call, I send a LinkedIn after every call. They're just consistent. You don't have to follow on it. They're just on it. And the third one is that they have to be interesting and compelling, right? So you have to want to buy from them. You have to, if it's a kayak, you have to want to buy with them. And people say, oh, they're a bit salesy, or I know they're going to be in sales. If you feel that, guess what? The customer's going to feel it. So do you trust them in front of your customers? And the best ones, you trust them and then some.
That's so well said, Rachel. I wish I'd heard this answer 1 year back. Right? I think the 2 things that stood out to me are consistency, right? Because, for example, we closed a deal yesterday that we lost actually a year back. The sales rep was persistent and consistent to send product updates, case studies, inviting them to their events, and we closed the deal yesterday that we lost a year back, right? So consistency, I feel, is so important. And one thing is, I think intuitively you feel that some sales reps connect well with their buyers somehow. It's a personality thing, right? And for example, in a construction industry, it might be a different persona that can connect compared to selling to marketers. And identifying that early on and having an intuition to figure that out is so important. And I made that mistake once. I intuitively felt that this might not work out, and it didn't work out. And I think those are 2 great points. I would just like.
So just to add to that, I think I love the way that Rachel said the difference between attributes and skills. I actually believe skills are much easier to teach. It's almost impossible to teach attributes. Skills can be taught. Some people are going to be better at, they have more aptitude than others, but skills can be taught. Attributes are what I think of what makes people trust you, and it's going to get you across the line. So what are the, for me, I look at more at attributes, and then I look at skills.
Yeah. And if I could quickly chime in myself as well, it's prepared. How prepared are you for that conversation? Mm-hmm. I've seen some folks who are making a call and the person picks up and that throws them off, right? And so be ready, be prepared for objections. If a person asks you, hey, what other industry did you work with? What specific case study can you be ready for all of that? Because the more prepared you are, the more trust you gain from them and the easier the process will go.
Yeah. I think the other thing I look for, the thing that's consistent across all companies I've worked in, all industries, all sizes of companies, if they put the customer first and can totally empathize with the customer, that's really, really important. If it's all about them and it's I, and I'm the hero and I did this and I did that, it's okay. Sometimes they can do very well, but if they're consistently talking about, well, why did that customer buy, and the stories are relating to the customer versus what they did as the hero, that to me is something I look for.
All excellent input here. So we have a lot of questions in the virtual chat, and we have one more here in the audience. So we're going to have to do a little bit of rapid fire. I know this is a topic we can dive deep on all day, but 1 minute answers. I'm going to start with you over here, sir.
I'll keep it quick. So I do 90% of my prospecting through LinkedIn right now. Basically, I'm going through the jobs list and I'm reaching out to either the person who posted the job or somebody, in the company who I think is relevant to it. And I then pitch them my agency versus applying for the job per se. The trouble, of course, is that I then have to do everything through InMail. And I wondered, how do you guys, on a very practical basis, get email addresses, phone numbers? How do you find someone's, a decision maker and reach them personally that's not LinkedIn InMail?
Zoom info.
Zoom info.
All right.
Quick answers.
Same answer.
Yeah.
Now the next person gets a minute and 45 seconds.
Perfect. Just added it on. Okay. So Gibbons, we can move on over to the virtual Q&A. Do you see that on your top right-hand side with the sidebar?
Yes, I do. So we have a question that says, can you talk more about the difference between B2B sales versus consumer sales? That should be a quick one.
Has anybody done both? I've done a little bit of both, so I'm happy to.
Yeah, go for it.
B2B sales are complex. Think of anything from selling to a dentist's office. Magazine subscriptions, the analogy I like to use is a simple sale to selling voting systems to the Philippine government. I've done like the whole range on B2B sales, but there's a process and a complexity throughout that. There's often multiple people involved. B2C, it's usually one person. Sometimes it's a spouse also, but it's one person involved. So it's usually more transactional. So think of a much simpler sales process. Now, a bigger ticket item like a house or a car in B2C starts to look a lot more like a B2B in terms of complexity, but less decision makers, less veto authority, less people that can influence the sale. That's the way I would be thinking about it.
Yeah, and just in case we don't get through all the questions, please feel free to find these lovely folks here. They're very knowledgeable. Throw them, ask them the questions on LinkedIn.
Yeah,
I'm
absolutely.
pretty sure they answer. So we'll ask one last one that I think is really important. It's really good to know. How do you convince your first customer to take the leap with your company?
Kishore, why don't you talk about how you did that with your first customer?
No, honestly, when I remember the time when the first customer we got, I couldn't believe it. I'm like, oh, somebody's paying money to buy my product. Oh, that's fantastic. So it was, but I think it has to do a lot with founder evangelism and building the trust that we will take care of you guys, whatever happens. And I think there's nothing that can beat that. Like really building that infectious energy with that buyer, telling them that we'll take care of you makes a lot more difference, and really evangelizing what you're doing. And I think it'll only come from the founder. There is no one else that can replace that particular role of getting the first customer. And a lot of companies make mistakes of hiring a sales leader or a sales AE to figure that out. But unfortunately, that part can't be outsourced.
I agree with that. And just to add to it real quick is I think you have to love that customer, and not just because they're your first customer, but you actually have to love them and what they're trying to achieve and care that they're successful. Because if you don't, they're not going to be successful, and you're not going to be successful with them.
Yeah. And the last thing I'll say is maybe sometimes it's more or less about convincing them and really just doing a good job understanding the challenges and the pains that they're going through. That's really relevant to the problems your product solves, right? So if you can truly understand their problems and you're asking great questions, they'll see it themselves. Awesome.
Hey, thanks a lot. That was great. It was a lot of fun.
Thanks, Ryan. Thanks, Gibbons. Thank you, everyone, for the opportunity. See you guys. Bye.